Eat your fruit snacks and enjoy. All right, here's my audience. I got 6, so this should be extra credit. All right. All right. Most of us have had a job before where no prior experience in that field was necessary, right? Jobs such as dishwashers, construction laborers, babysitters, dog walkers. Is it fair then that in this job category, the same job category is Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States? Good evening, my name is Gabriel Krug, and I'm going to explain why military service should be a prerequisite for the U.S. presidency. In my own experience as an active duty Marine, I can attest that military service offers its service members unique benefits, both physical and mental, as a result of its training and lifestyle. Our president should be a recipient of these benefits as well. Among these benefits is an understanding of how the military operates, the development of a combat mindset, and the ability to relate to other service members. First and foremost, if one of your primary job responsibilities is to be Commander-in-Chief of the entire U.S. military, you should understand exactly what it is you're commanding and how it works. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution provides that the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. Of course, today that's been expanded to include all 5 branches of the military. However, nowhere in the Constitution does it state the President must have prior military experience. Article 2, Section 1 establishes only 3 requirements. You have to be at least 35 years old, you have to be a resident of the United States for at least 14 years, and you have to be a natural-born citizen of the United States. Anyone who meets these requirements is, per the Constitution, eligible to be president. However, one look at history will tell you that our most successful and celebrated presidents were military veterans. Presidents such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and JFK, they all served in the military in some capacity. Now, you might be thinking, we're talking about great presidents, what about FDR? He led us in World War II. FDR knew the value of military service. In fact, when he was Secretary of the Navy during World War I, he actually attempted to resign his post so he could commission into the Navy as an officer, but his resignation wasn't accepted due to existing health problems. Anyways, going back to our list, some of these presidents, aforementioned presidents, served in intense combat. Some of them achieved very high ranks and stayed in the military for decades before ever pursuing a career in politics. But all of them had one thing in common. Their background and experience in the armed forces proved useful later on in their political careers. So think about some of the names I just mentioned. Think about how each man's military service may have impacted their relationship with the military, their perspective and their insight that they may have otherwise lacked. President Kennedy successfully negotiated arguably the most climactic era in the Cold War without American and Soviet troops firing a single shot. Do you think his experience in a combat leadership role during World War II may have translated to his leadership of the armed forces as Commander-in-Chief? President Lincoln fought tooth and nail to keep the United States united during the notoriously bloody Civil War. Do you think his experience leading soldiers in the Black Hawk War decades prior may have acquainted him with the very army he would lead to victory against the Confederates? Bringing it back to the very beginning of our country's history, when Congress established the Continental Army in 1775, George Washington was nominated to be its Commander-in-Chief, which I must reiterate is still a primary responsibility of the President. Was he nominated because of his political prowess? Right? Was George Washington nominated because of his voting record as a senator, his endorsements, his television charm, or the ability to look good on paper? No, he was nominated because he had proven himself in battle and displayed wisdom in the subject of military strategy. He would later accept that nomination and defeat Britain in the War for Independence. Now, to bring it back to modern day, I understand we're no longer fighting in a large-scale war, let alone a civil war, revolutionary war, or anything of that magnitude. But it doesn't matter. The principle remains that the Commander-in-Chief of our nation's armed forces must demonstrate an understanding of the military in order to be successful. What better way to acquire that understanding than to experience it firsthand? Presidents such as the ones I've named have gone down in history as some of our most renowned leaders and can directly relate their knowledge and command of the armed forces to their own prior experiences. By the way, the examples I'm giving are older because I want to avoid controversy by referencing more recent politics. I'm only making examples of presidents whose legacies have already been firmly established. Secondly, military service instills strong leadership traits and values in individuals, traits and values that are exactly what is expected of a world leader. The military is an excellent place to learn discipline, grittiness, self-confidence, and yet also humility, to name just a few. It teaches you to remain calm under pressure. It teaches you to gather information, to organize your thoughts in a clear and concise way, and to make the most rational, well-prepared decisions. It teaches you to work well in a team, to communicate, to overcome your differences, and focus on the mission at hand. It's not to say you can't learn these things elsewhere, but in the military, it's a particularly effective teaching strategy. Going back to our examples from history, George Washington did not learn how to lead by sitting in Congress drafting bills for years at the comfort of a desk. He learned how to lead by being a career soldier. His education was the French and Indian War. It was crossing the Delaware. It was Valley Forge. Those are the moments that formed his character and gifted him with a sense of courage and duty that you don't get from being a career politician. Thomas Jefferson, the father of the Declaration of Independence, didn't just advocate for personal liberty. He embodied it to his very core. As a colonel of the Virginia militia, he knew the value of freedom and what it cost to defend it. When it came to fighting the tyranny of the British, he demonstrated the courage and initiative to fight not only with the pen, but also with the sword. When John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country," he spoke those words as a man who nearly gave up his own life for the sake of his country. As a decorated World War II veteran, Kennedy developed the mindset that allowed him to maintain his bearing and make sharp decisions that would later guide his actions as president during one of the most polarizing periods in the history of our country and the world. It's through these examples that I make the point that military service goes far beyond strength in the body, but strength in the mind, character, and soul as well. It is this experience that has allowed so many great men of the past to harness their skills into leading the greatest country in the world. Thirdly, a president who has served in the armed forces will gain the respect of his fellow servicemen and beyond. We all know that for politicians to maintain a strong fan base, it really helps when the people they represent feel like they're in touch with the rest of the population, that they share a common understanding when it comes to perspective and issues. A president who served in the military will instantly appear more relatable, and not just to the military community. Consider the following: family members and children of service members who grew up in the military lifestyle. Law enforcement personnel, blue-collar workers, many of whose trades often mirror military occupational specialties performed by service members. Add all these groups of people together and you see how a military veteran presidential candidate might really resonate with a huge portion of the country in a way that a career lawyer, businessman, academic, lobbyist, or politician simply could not. Additionally, such candidates could offer a refreshing solution to a modern conundrum. In a recent article, the Military Times reported that the percentage of veterans in Congress has been steadily declining since the 1970s. In the years following the Vietnam War, almost 3/4 of lawmakers had served in the military. Today, that number sits at a meek 18%. In fact, today we live in a country where, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, less than 8% of the population has served in the military. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, less than 0.5% of the population is serving on active duty now. Military service is becoming increasingly less common. And according to the former Marine General and Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, the military-civilian cultural disconnect is at an all-time high, stemming from the start of the all-volunteer force in the 1970s. However, despite the clear drawbacks of the situation, it's not irreversible. Far from it. Enacting a change that would require presidential candidates to have military experience could be a major step forward in two distinct ways: in strengthening the trust and confidence of service members and communities who share similar values in the president, and restoring the cultural bridge between military and civilian life. In summary of my presentation, military experience is not a constitutional requirement to be president of the United States. However, there are many reasons why it should be. Evidence gathered throughout our country's history demonstrates the advantage that military experience offers when placed in a leadership role. Someone who seeks the responsibility of commander-in-chief should be qualified to lead as such through the crucible of their own personal experience in the armed forces. Additionally, such a candidate should carry themselves in a manner befitting a disciplined, competent, and tactical-minded leader, all qualities which are best acquired while in the military service. And lastly, the potential to reach the military community and others like it must not be overlooked, as it has increasingly been in recent years. The benefits of a president with military experience must be acknowledged and considered as we move into the future and all the unknowns that go with it. Thank you.